All right.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here after a very long day facilitating a workshop. But I love doing this stuff because digital transformation, as consultants like to call it, or being semi-human at work, as I like to call it, is one of the most important things that I think we can help our companies and the people we work with as UXers. We are uniquely placed to help the companies that we're in build a creative culture. So I want to start off with, what is creativity? It's one of those words that everyone kind of thinks they know what they mean when they say it, but I would argue that most people have very different definitions quite without realizing it. So whenever I want a really super official definition, I go to the Oxford English Dictionary. This is what the OED says creativity is. It's a use of imagination or original ideas to create something, or inventiveness. Creativity, yes, it is about obviously creating something. It is about being inventive, but I think that it's really important to also be open to being wrong when you're being creative. And being open to being wrong is probably the thing that, as managers or as people who are working in positions of leadership within an organization, it's probably the thing we are least good at, being able or being open to being wrong. So the OED has several suggested sentences that for use of creativity. The first one is, firms are keen to encourage creativity. I would argue that some firms are. So you have consultancies that go around the world encouraging creativity. So IDEO is probably a classic example of this. So they bungee in. They do a number of fantastic two-day workshops like I've just been doing with my stakeholders. They leave a wonderful deck and a sort of happy feeling behind them, and then they bungee out. And what is left behind is, I would argue, sadness, terrible sadness on the part of people who are left behind. Next example sentence. We owe it to them to make sure they get a fair return for their creativity, flair, and inspiration. I would hope, and I would hope that you as UXers would hope, that you are getting a fair return for your creativity, flair, and inspiration. What does a fair return mean, though? So a fair return doesn't just mean the salary that we're drawing for being UXers. I mean, that's nice. We probably wouldn't go to work without it. But I would say that a fair return is also a dividend of happiness, a dividend of feeling like you're able to do your best work when you go to work. Raise your hand. How many feel like you're doing your best work when you go to work right now? Oh, okay. Third of you guys? Okay, fair enough. Which leads into my next sentence. Working in an office can suck all of the energy and creativity in your system. Oh. Well, I think that the OED was quite right, actually. So working in an office can suck all of the creativity and energy out of your system, even when you're working in as nice an office as Moo. I have to say that, by the way, because my husband actually works for Moo. Even when you work in a beautiful office like this, where there are a ton of creatives around you, where the entire company is about being super creative, that's what Moo's known for, obviously, it can feel, or working at The Guardian, for example, it can feel like you're coming in, it's a bit of a grind, meh. So, why do companies need creativity? This is a bit of a long lead-in, but I will say that there are a number of companies that think that they need creativity. They're not sure why. It's a sort of thing that people hire consultants to come in and infuse throughout the organization. But much like I was making this simile over there to the great discomfort of my fellow speakers, that it's rather like being an Alcoholics Anonymous. You have to admit that you're an alcoholic before you're able to be helped by Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Well, you have to admit as a company that you discourage creativity or that you are uncreative before you are able to kind of let creativity really soak into your company. So, what are the actual benefits of creativity? How do you sell this to your stakeholders? How do you make them want this creativity that you've got? Well, creativity leads to more productivity, I would argue. I have a list of things, but I won't actually. You know, creativity, when you are feeling energized, when you're feeling like you're doing the best work, when you feel like the ideas that you're generating as UXers that you spend all day in the lab or on your computer trying to bring to life, when you feel like that is valued, it makes you want to go to work. It makes you feel like you are contributing something of value to the company. You want to invest your time, your energy, your effort into continue doing that. And this produces business results. The business results that it produces, hey, more money. Who doesn't like more money? It's not only in the products and services that you're creating for your company as UXers, but have you ever worked at a really shitty job? Okay, so did you want to turn up every day at the really shitty job? Okay, did you take the occasional sick day just as a sort of mental health holiday because you didn't want to turn up at your shitty job? So how many of you couldn't wait to quit your shitty job? Okay, yeah, most of you. So all of that costs a company money. So when you're calling in sick because you just can't fucking face it today, or when you quit and they have to recruit, I love recruiters. Recruiters are great, but they're expensive. So when companies have to recruit new people to come in to replace you because you quit your shitty job, that costs them money. And they could have saved the money if they had just been good people who encouraged you to be creative in your life and in your work. So if they do that, what do you get? More joy. I love joy. Do you love joy? Joy's good, right? Okay. It's a joy to work around people who are happy. And it is a joy to be happy yourself. And when you're happy, you feel like you're, firing on all cylinders. It's a lot easier to make progress and to feel like you are moving forward as a company. Who wouldn't want that? Okay, I can quit now because you can all go and sell this to your stakeholders, right? Like, it's that easy, right? Okay, no. So I have to continue. All right, how can you actually encourage creativity? So a lot of these people, a lot of people who come in and talk about digital transformation, which just remember is being like semi-human at work. That's what digital transformation means. So people who come in and talk about digital transformation talk mainly to the leadership. So they're talking to the CDO or the CEO or something like that, and they're saying, here's what you can do. I don't think that you can wait for the epiphany to light upon the brain of your CEO. So you've got to do something yourself before you're going to see any kind of benefit. So, empathize with people. Cal's going to talk a lot more about this later, so I won't belabor the point, but it's especially important in an audience of UXers to say, we encourage empathy for our users. We try to empathize with our users. We interview them to figure out what's going on in their head. We think about their experience. We're very deeply interested in empathizing with our users. So why the fuck don't we empathize with the people that we work with? I'm just saying. All right, switch perspectives. So how often have you thought, oh, my colleague is just whatever. Okay, how many of you have not thought that at some point in the past week? Okay, all of you have thought that at some point in the past week. but this is the thing, your colleague is probably sitting across the table from you and they're thinking the exact same thing about you. Now, why is your colleague thinking the exact same thing about you? Actually, why are you thinking that about him? So if you can empathize with your colleague, your boss, your whatever, and figure out where they're coming from and why they're coming from that place, that, I would argue, is a creative and is a generative process that you can do without waiting for high-priced consultants or for, you know, a light bulb to go on in your boss's mind, right? Give context for things. So context, it's really important. It's a watchword for us as UXers, right? This idea that every experience or everything exists within a larger ecosystem of experiences and things. But we don't give that to people when we lead, generally. We don't build backwards from the future. So what I mean by that is there is some kind of future state that you are trying to get to with whatever you're doing. There is some end goal that you have in mind. But we don't normally talk about that. We don't normally talk about the end goal and say, what will we have done in order to get here? Giving people that why, giving the colleagues that you work with that why is very important to get them into the generative mindset where they're being creative and you're figuring out what steps you can take to get to that future state. Inspire a thirst for knowledge. So this is something that I try to impress upon everyone that I work with. So I dropped out of university, right? I was going to be a medieval historian. If you haven't realized, university in the States is really frickin' expensive. So I could either be like 250 grand in debt and be a medieval history professor making 30 grand a year. I don't know how that's gonna work. Or I could drop out of university and figure out how the heck to have a career in something that would not leave me starving on the pavements, right? So the process that I went through was a lot of hustle, was coming to a lot of events like this, was talking to a lot of people, was, you know, learning on the job, working for free. Sometimes don't work for free. That's a whole nother talk, but don't work for free. Do as I say, not as I do. But with some people who want to transition into the industry, or some people who have gone to university and have a fancy degree and they feel like they know all the things now. You probably don't know all the things. I don't know all the things. The university professor definitely does not know all the things. So I'm not going to quote Steve Jobs here, but if you stay hungry, I won't say the other bit, but if you realize, if you remember what got you into this industry, what made you want to do UX or whatever the heck it is you're doing in the first place, and you continue building towards that and making yourself better, that is a creative process. That is a generative process. That's something that you can do yourself, and that's something that you can encourage everybody around you to do. Super important. Continually test your thinking. So I talked about the willingness to be wrong, and how especially the higher up and the ladder we go. So I have a few people reporting to me, and there is, even though I hope that I am not an asshole as a boss, I sincerely hope I'm not an asshole, ask the people who report to me. There is still this pull sometimes when they say, actually, did you think about, and I'm like, ooh, because I don't want to be wrong, right? Nobody wants to be wrong. But the thing is, if you can stay open and willing to be corrected by people, to be inspired by people, no matter what your relative position of authority or whatever else is throughout your career, it's going to be a lot better for you, but for the poor people who have to work with you if you remain that way throughout your career. All right, and leadership. This is kind of my last point before I go into some stories. It's really important to realize that when I say leadership, I don't mean being a manager. I don't mean being a boss. It can be your first job. You can be right out of university, and you can be a leader. How does that work? How can you be a leader when you're right out of university? Well, leadership comes from within. So the first person that you lead is yourself. So the only person that you can control, the only people's actions that you really have influence over, that's you. That's the only person that you can ever control. So you can say, well, despite, whatever's happening around me, despite the lack of creativity at my company, despite the fact that I work a shitty job, I'm going to do the best job I can at the shitty job until I can find something better. That is a really important kind of process, finding a creative, I will say this, way to work within the constraints that you've got, and that is kind of infectious. The more you do that for yourself, the more kind of joy and satisfaction you get in yourself. Other people, they'll go one of two ways. They will leave your presence forever because they're sort of gloomy Gus and they can't handle you, or they'll kind of take inspiration from that. And I know which one of those I would rather work with, right? So for the actual bosses, managers, whatever in here, I know there are some of you, I know you're lurking out there. Facilitation, allowing people to make their own mistakes, to follow their own processes, to do things that you would not personally do in the way that you would not personally do them, is so much better for their development, for your business as a whole in the future, than commanding them and saying, you do this exactly as I say. If people follow your commands, they're not learning. And if you make them follow your commands, even when they're wrong, you don't learn either. Almost last bit. Trust people. So you have to come from a place of trust in order to do any of the things that I have just talked about. Many managers, many people in general come from a place of fear. So they don't want to be caught out. They don't want to look foolish. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to. And this place of fear actually perpetuates for them what they don't want. So you've heard, obviously, of self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So when you come from a place of fear and you act from a place of fear, you create those self-fulfilling prophecies. If you come at your work as a leader, as a person fresh out of school, whatever, and trust that people in general, the vast majority of people, are trying as hard as they can and want to do a good job, and let them go out and do that, it will be easier for you and better for the people that you are trying to work with. So your preferences, they're not the arbiter of correctness. So there has to be, and you have to agree with the people that you work with, some standard of what is right and what is good to be done that doesn't lie in your preference. This is especially important as a boss. Saying, I don't like the way you did that is not the same thing as saying you did that wrong. I can get to the goal in a million different ways that my boss or someone that I'm working with might not have thought with, but as long as I haven't broken any laws, nobody is hurt, the Guardian is not writing horrible articles about me, I have learned a lot and we have gotten to a good place, does it really matter that I wrote a discussion guide differently than you would have done? I have seen people freak the fuck out about these. It's stupid. Devolve decision making. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but decisions should be made at the lowest level practicable. So obviously, the intern is not going to decide on the entire business strategy for the company, but the intern can decide, whether they print this thing out on, cardstock or like 40-pound paper or something like that. It's like there should not be diktats, coming down from on high about stock of paper things should be printed on. The people sort of in the middle, okay, time for sleep. All right, so the people in the middle basically take decisions at the lowest level that's possible, and people will feel out of this, they will feel empowered, and they will feel energized to want to do their job in the best way possible when you empower them to make decisions that they know how to take and are within their sort of remit. All right, and the more you trust people, the more trustworthy they will be. So if you treat people like criminals, you're gonna get criminals, for the most part. If you treat people like good people who are doing the best they can in the best way that they know how, they will try harder to do the best they can, and they will begin to learn better ways to do what they need to do. And then, at the very last, don't compromise on this in any way. This is my red line for anywhere that I work with. I will not work for people who stifle my creativity, who say, no, you cannot make a random decision that you've made in other companies for 20 years. So these people who, you must clock in no later than 9 a.m., otherwise you're sacked. Well, if I come in at 9:05 and I stay till 7 o'clock at night, does it matter that I clocked in 5 minutes late? So I won't work for people who try to micromanage or who try to say, you can't follow the process that you need to follow in order to do your best work. And I refuse to be the type of asshole who does that to other people. Just saying. All right, I know there's some people in here, the last time I gave this talk to a room full of bankers, and I could just feel them thinking at me, but it's not gonna work at a bank. All right, so I will tell you 2 industries that it has worked in, and then you can tell me, you can come back at me and then say that it won't work in your industry, right? All right, so it will work in the military. Devolved decision-making, autonomy, and trust works in the military. What the hell do you mean? All right, this guy did it. His name is David Marquette. He took over the worst performing submarine in the US Navy. Like, it was dangerous. It had been dangerous for years. They kept failing inspections. Someday, it was going to be like Das Boot, where they sink to the bottom of the ocean. They were all going to be killed or something. They sucked that bad. This guy's first day on the submarine, this was a different class of submarine than he had ever worked on before. So he said, yes, speed ahead by 2/3. And the guy subordinate to him said, yes, speed ahead by 2/3. And the submarine didn't move. And he wondered, okay, why is the submarine not working? So he asked the second in command, the fuck is going on? And the second in command said, well, but the submarine doesn't have that speed setting. Then why the fuck did you repeat my order? Well, because it was your order. So the issue with orders in the military, or orders on this submarine anyway, is that people were trained to uncritically repeat them and carry them out, no matter whether they were right, wrong, impossible, possible, whatever. David thought about this for a while. What the heck can I do? How can I make this submarine the best submarine? So he decided, let's devolve decision-making. So instead of having his subordinates uncritically repeat his orders, he said, second in command, is it safe to move the submarine ahead? And the second in command would say, yes, I've done this, 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 and that. It's safe. I propose that we move forward the submarine. And then he would say, okay. So it might seem silly, but it's a radical change of idea. So instead of uncritically repeating the boss's order, you trust your second in command to say, I know what we have to do. I have done these things. I believe that it is okay. I intend to do this. And you respond to their intention. David did this for a while. This submarine is now the highest rated submarine in the entire US Navy and has been for many years. Next thing, manufacturing. So this was an automotive plant. NUMMI was an automotive plant that General Motors ran for 20 years. It was the worst auto plant with the worst workforce in the industry. And worst workforce in the industry is according to the union, not according to GM. When even the union says you're bad. So these auto workers would do things like sabotage cars by putting glass Coke bottles in the doors so that they would rattle, so that they could get overtime fixing the cars that they had fucked up. The supervisors were allowing people to get drunk and high at work. GM closed down this plant, which had to run for 20 years, saying, okay, this can't be rehabilitated. These guys are fucked up. Toyota said, actually reopen it, hire back everybody. Hire back those guys that got drunk and high and sabotaged the cars, and we'll show you how to do it better. So they sent some guys over to Japan, and they taught them the Toyota way, which is about enabling and empowering people to work in the best way that they can. So instead of having no communication between departments and having, just an endless stream of cars coming down the line, looking for quantity over quality, they said, okay, now anybody is able to stop the line at any time. Every single person is responsible for quality. And if you see something that is bad, you are empowered to stop the entire line of like 2,000 people working on these cars. Within a couple years, best auto factory in the entire United States. So you're thinking, okay, well, no, it'll work in my industry. So I'm going to schedule a hack day. It's going to be fucking awesome. We're going to be creative. No. This will depress people more. So if you're saying 2 days out of the year, we're going to go to workshop, it's going to be an offsite, it's going to be great, we're going to have free beer and stuff like that. We're going to be really creative. And then we're going to come back and we're going to go in the same shit office and shit culture, and that's going to fix things somehow. It's not. What you need to do is make a commitment to bringing new ways of working into your everyday. And that's it. Don't cram creativity into box to discourage people. And this is Twitter this, tweet this. This is what I want you to take away. Giving other people ownership, devolving ownership, will give you the freedom not only to be wrong, but to do your best work and to allow your company to, move into 22nd century? Whatever. The end. This is me.
So we do some questions on that.
All right.
Do you want to kick off with the first question?
Oh, come on. Somebody has to be the first.
There we go.
There's a first. Okay.
Hi, thanks for that. It was really interesting. I'm wondering how you find pattern libraries and those sorts of devices affect creativity in the workplace.
I found that they can if you let them. So I assume that there's a reason why your pattern libraries were created. And hopefully, if you're doing well, if you're doing atomic design well, you have a pattern library. The pattern library is to allow you to quickly put designs together, iterate on things, and they are, all within the kind of company's, design guidelines, for example. This can become restrictive. I agree with the thesis of your question. If you have leadership who are obsessed with following the letter of the law, which is use stuff only from this library, to the exclusion of following the spirit of the law, which is rapidly develop, iterate, put stuff together, get stuff out the door. So what I would recommend, if you're working with the latter type of management, is to agree parameters within which you can use the library freely. Parameters within which you can add whatever necessary components to the library and say, look, if I operate within these guidelines, there is no fault. So we did that at the Guardian. We have a creative director. He's a lovely guy. He's much better than most creative directors. Yes. Don't tell him I said this. It was between us, right? And the guy with the video at the back. So Alex is lovely. We have very stringent design guidelines. He's a guardian of the Guardian brand. We sat down, meaning me and some of the other UXers, sat down with him and said, look, we're going to still use the library, we're going to still use the design guidelines for live tests that are going out on the site, but in order to be able to do this rapidly, in order to be able to get to the purpose of the test, which is do the minimum thing to get the information that you need to make a decision, we would like to agree to the following parameters. Will you do that for us? And he said, okay. So you don't know until you ask, really, I guess. That help?